Engineer ranks every watch brand best to worst for reliability. Do this right now. Pull out the watch on your wrist right now and really look at it. It looks good, but do you actually know if it's reliable and would run for the next 20 years? Or if it held its value on the secondary market? Most people don't know, and most watch content won't touch the question honestly. Today we do. Number 8. TAG Heuer. Here's a number that should bother you. $3,500. That's what TAG Heuer charges for a Carrera with a Caliber 5 movement. $3,500. Ask any competent watchmaker to open the case back, and what they'll find is a Sellita SW2001. The same movement powering a Christopher Ward C60 at $400. The same caliber and micro brands most people in this room have never heard of. Identical architecture, same parts, same tolerances, same factory spec of plus or minus 12 seconds per day. Different name on the dial, and an extra $3,000 gone. The SW200 is not a bad movement. The original version had documented problems, but the -1 revision addressed them. Current SW2001 production is competent, stable, and deployed across dozens of brands. Watchmakers report running them for years without incident. This is not an argument that Sellita is unreliable. It's an argument about what you're paying for. When you spend TAG money, you're implicitly buying TAG's service infrastructure. And this is where reliability stops being about the movement and starts being about total ownership. Independent watchmakers report genuine friction sourcing TAG parts through the official network. The brand has progressively pushed service toward authorized centers. Longer waits, higher labor bills, and less flexibility when something needs attention. One collector documented a Carrera chronograph, spending 14 months in and out of warranty service for a moisture ingress issue. The movement was fine. The service pipeline wasn't. A standard Carrera service at a TAG-authorized center typically runs $900 to $1,100. The same movement in a Christopher Ward costs about half that at an independent watchmaker, with parts available from multiple suppliers and no waiting for an allocation. That cost and access gap is the reliability argument, not the movement spec. And then there's the manufacturer labeling. The Caliber 7 is a Sellita SW3001 rebadged. The Caliber 16 chronograph ran on the ETA Valjoux 7750 for decades before the brand gradually moved to Sellita's SW500 equivalent. A movement so widely deployed, it appears in watches from under $200 to several thousand, depending entirely on the name on the dial. Forum threads on WatchUSeek have debated whether TAG's Caliber renaming constitutes deception for years, and the community's conclusion is not charitable. A buyer in London who spent $4,200 on an Aquariser Professional opened the case back at a watchmaker's suggestion and discovered what was inside, said what a lot of collectors eventually say, "I could have had the same movement for $60. He wasn't wrong about the math. He was wrong about what TAG was selling him, which turned out to be a name rather than a mechanism." Reliability has two components: the movement keeping time and the ecosystem supporting it when it doesn't. TAG scores average on the first and poor on the second. Have you owned a TAG Heuer? Did you ever need to service it? TAG's reliability failure is commercial, not mechanical. What comes next? Built something technically real, then put a proprietary wall around it. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. That's why I created a complete insider guide to buying watches. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 7. Tudor. Tudor deserves more credit than it usually gets, and more honesty than it usually gets, both at the same time. The MT5602 is an ambitious movement, silicon hairspring, which provides magnetic resistance and no lubrication required at the pallet fork. Variable inertia, balance wheel adjusted by screws, COSC certification, 70-hour power reserve. Tudor spent real resources developing something proprietary rather than dropping an ETA into their cases. That decision reflects genuine watchmaking ambition. It deserves acknowledgement before the criticism arrives. A watchmaker, posting as bench guy on WatchUSeek, published a detailed service account of an MT5602 that failed under 2 years of regular wear. Diagnosis: lubricant in the column wheel bushing had become gummy enough to cause stiction, meaning parts adhering where they should slide. Full strip, clean, rebuild required. His conclusion, stated plainly, if buying a Tudor for himself, he'd choose one with the ETA movement, because the ETA he knows intimately. The MT5602 is still earning its track record. This matters beyond one documented case. A watch's reliability isn't only about how often it fails. It's about what happens when it does. The ETA 2824 has been in production since the 70s and is understood by watchmakers on every inhabited continent. Tools for it are universal. Service procedures are documented in multiple languages. Parts are available from independent suppliers globally. The MT5602 has none of that accumulated infrastructure yet. On Millenary watches, a documented case found the microstellar regulating tool for the MT5652, a variant in the same caliber family, was simply unavailable to US independent watchmakers. Tudor's apparent preference: service goes back to the authorized network. That's a business decision, not a watchmaking one. But it costs owners in wait times, service fees, and geographic flexibility. A Black Bay owner in Lagos or Sao Paulo is not in the same position as someone near a Tudor service center in Geneva. What makes Tudor's position particularly complicated is Kenissi. Kenissi's production facility in La Chaux-de-Fonds supplies movements to all 3 brands, which means the MT56XX family isn't purely a Tudor in-house development in the way that phrase might suggest. It's a manufacture movement in the technical sense. Whether that changes the parts availability picture over the long term as Kenissi scales production remains uncertain, and honest reviewers should say so rather than pretending certainty in either direction. Compare this to the old Pelagos references running the ETA 2824, which some forum members actively seek out on the secondary market, precisely because the service infrastructure is so much simpler and cheaper. The unspoken logic in those threads: the worse movement is the better long-term ownership proposition. It's not really a joke. Tudor at number 7 is not a condemnation of what they've built. The MT5602 may age very well, but at $3,000 to $5,000, you're buying a bet on a future track record, not a proven one. Tudor built something technically real and put a proprietary wall around it. Now we step into brands where the arguments get more interesting. Number 6, Omega. In 1999, a British watchmaker named George Daniels completed an escapement design he'd spent decades refining, one that replaced the sliding contact of the traditional Swiss lever with a rolling action, dramatically reducing friction between the pallet fork and escape wheel. Omega licensed it. By 2007, it was in commercial production. The coaxial escapement is one of the last significant mechanical innovations in practical watchmaking. Omega deserves full credit for recognizing its value and deploying it at scale when the rest of the industry was watching from the sideline. Their master chronometer certification goes through METAS, the Swiss Federal Institute of Metrology, independently of Omega. It tests the complete assembled watch, not just the movement on a timing machine. Magnetic resistance to 15,000 Gauss, more than 15 times what a standard Rolex handles. Accuracy within 0 to 5 seconds per day post-casing. Externally verified numbers, by a body Omega doesn't control. Omega didn't design their own standard and self-certify the way Rolex did with the superlative chronometer. They invited independent regulators in, and the regulators' criteria are published for anyone to read. That's worth something. So why is Omega at number 6 on this list? Internal inconsistency is the first problem. Not every Omega carries master chronometer certification. The DeVille Prestige, several Constellation references, and portions of the Seamaster range run on COSC-rated movements, not META's tested ones. The coaxial escapement isn't universal across the lineup. Someone purchasing a Constellation thinking they're getting the same architecture as a Seamaster 300M isn't. The marketing doesn't make that clear enough. Omega's internal variation is real and matters when you're evaluating what you're actually buying versus what the brand's marketing suggests. The second problem is practical serviceability. Ask most experienced watchmakers which they'd rather work on, a Rolex 3,235, or an Omega 8,800? And the answer is typically Rolex. Not because Omega is inferior, because Rolex manufacturing consistency means a watchmaker anywhere in the world faces the same tolerance stack on every example they open. The coaxial escapement requires specific training and specific tooling to service correctly. Done wrong, a coaxial service can leave the watch less accurate than it arrived. Done wrong on a 3,235, that outcome is unusual because the architecture is more forgiving of technique variation. The most reliable watch isn't necessarily the one with the most innovative movement. It's the one whose service ecosystem guarantees competent care anywhere you happen to need it. Omega at number 6 is still a strong result. A well-maintained master chronometer Seamaster runs for decades without catastrophic failure. It's just that 5 brands handle the complete picture better. One more thing worth saying. The collector who buys a used Omega Seamaster from 2009, before the master chronometer era and before the updated coaxial calibers, is buying a movement that predates most of the engineering improvements Omega markets today. The brand's reputation is partly built on current production. The secondary market is full of older references that carry the name, but not the specs. Reliability requires knowing specifically what you're buying, and with Omega more than most, the vintage versus current distinction runs deep. Omega made a genuine advance in escapement engineering. The next brand made 100 years of smaller advances, and the compound effect is something the industry underestimates. Number 5, Seiko. There's a watch you seek thread from a collector who pulled an old Seiko 5 from his late father's attic. The watch had been sitting completely unworn for over 20 years. He wound it. It ran, drifting a few seconds per day after 2 decades of stillness. No service, no lubricant refresh. A mechanism left in darkness for 20 years that woke up when asked. That is not an accident. That is the 7S26 architecture, and it is one of the most underrated movement designs in modern watchmaking. Seiko's NH family carries the same DNA. The magic lever automatic winding engages in both rotational directions through a mechanism that bypasses the traditional click spring ratchet, meaning less wear on the winding train components. Fewer failure points in the system, keeping the mainspring tensioned. The NH35 carries 24 joules and factory spec runs -20 to +40 seconds per day, a wide tolerance that makes collectors nervous, but most examples from production run considerably tighter. A competent watchmaker can regulate 1 to ±5 seconds per day in under an hour, with tools stocked in workshops on every continent. Replacement NH35 movements cost $60 to $80 and are available anywhere. The real story about Seiko reliability isn't the movement spec. It's what sits above the movement in the supply chain. Seiko manufactures their own oscillator crystals, their own mainsprings, their own lubricants, their own cases and dials. When a Seiko component fails, the replacement was made by the same organization to the same specification. No secondary supplier quietly changed material grades. Omega and Rolex are vertically integrated too. The meaningful difference is that Seiko runs from $60 to $60,000, and that engineering discipline holds across the full range. The same organizational culture developing the Spring Drive UFA oversees the NH35 rolling off the line at SII Manufacturing in Shisui, Chiba. Step up to the 6R35. The movement in the presage and upper prospects references, and the accuracy window tightens to -10 to +15 seconds per day at factory spec, with most examples running considerably better than that. Service intervals are rated at 3 years by Seiko, though real-world watchmakers routinely see them running well past 5 years without issues. A 6R35 service at a competent independent watchmaker typically runs $150 to $250. Compare that to Omega's coaxial service at $400 to $600 minimum at an authorized center, or a Rolex standard service at $800 to $1,200. The honest weakness at Seiko's mid-tier remains factory accuracy. Entry-level examples sometimes push the top of the spec range out of the box. If tight timekeeping matters to you fresh from the packaging, you step up. But for the question, will this movement be repairable anywhere in the world 15 years from now? Seiko's answer is the closest thing to a guarantee that mechanical watchmaking offers. So, to answer one thing the watch community debates endlessly, yes, there are more sophisticated movements at this price point. More beautifully decorated ones, with finer anglage and more complex regulation systems. But sophisticated and reliable are not synonyms. The NH35's genius is precisely its lack of sophistication. Fewer complications in both the technical and literal sense, built to run for decades, with minimal intervention from anyone, anywhere in the world. Seiko is reliable by design. Grand Seiko is reliable by obsession, and those are different things, measurable in seconds per year. Number 4. Grand Seiko. Let's start with something most coverage skips entirely about the Grand Seiko 9F caliber. Most quartz manufacturers batch test their oscillator crystals. They measure a production run, sort specimens by frequency deviation, and assign tightest tolerance pieces to flagship movements. Grand Seiko does not batch test the 9F's crystals. Each quartz oscillator is individually frequency adjusted by a technician after installation into the movement. One crystal, one technician, one logged adjustment. That individual calibration is why the 9F achieves plus or minus 5 seconds per year. COSC's mechanical chronometer standard allows -4 to +6 seconds per day. The Grand Seiko 9F beats that by a factor of roughly 365. One day's allowable COSC deviation is the 9F's allowable annual deviation. Then there's the spring drive. The 9R65 is not a mechanical movement. It's not a quartz movement. It uses a mainspring for power, wound by hand or rotor, but instead of a lever escapement regulating the gear train, it uses a glide wheel, a trisynchro regulator disc generating electromagnetic resistance as it spins, controlled by an integrated circuit maintaining exactly 8 revolutions per second. Energy converted to resistance dissipates as heat. No escapement click. No metal-on-metal impact at the regulation point. No step and release. The glide wheel brakes the gear train with continuously variable resistance. The result? Plus or minus 1 second per day from a movement with no battery, no external signal, and mechanics so unusual that Seiko required 11 years of internal development before considering them market-ready. The Spring Drive UFA achieves plus or minus 20 seconds per year, not a rounding error, a genuine engineering specification. These watches are built at the Shizukuishi and Shinshu manufacturing workshops in Japan. Visitor access is essentially zero, and production volumes are tight enough that watchmakers who work there sometimes describe the culture as closer to instrument manufacturing than watch production. That context matters for understanding why Grand Seiko's failure rates are so low. They're not producing at the volume where statistical outliers in manufacturing become routine. Grand Seiko's one genuine vulnerability is service geography. Parts come from Japan. Service centers are concentrated in major cities. An independent watchmaker without a Seiko supply relationship faces real limitations with spring drive calibers. Service costs are accordingly higher than mid-tier Seiko, and wait times extend. But if reliability means probability of keeping accurate time for 25 years without catastrophic failure, Grand Seiko is building some of the most dependable movements in commercial production. The broader point about why Grand Seiko achieves these results is worth making explicitly. Volume, discipline, matters. These watches are produced at the Shizukuishi and Shinshu workshops, where technicians are assigned to individual caliber families and work on them for years. That accumulation of focused human expertise produces a failure rate profile that mass production at scale can't replicate through process control alone. The watchmaking industry often treats Grand Seiko as a prestige brand. It's more accurately an engineering culture that happens to produce very beautiful objects. Grand Seiko makes precision feel inevitable. The next brand makes reliability feel inevitable by removing the things that can go wrong before the watch ever reaches the customer. Number 3. Citizen. Let me be specific about what Citizen's Caliber 0100 actually does, plus or minus 1 second per year. Without GPS, without radio signal, without any external reference whatsoever. A self-contained, light-powered movement, losing less than a single second annually, because Citizen built a thermocompensation circuit into an oscillator running at 8.4 MHz, more than twice the frequency of a standard quartz crystal. that continuously corrects for the frequency shifts temperature changes cause in quartz. Those shifts are the primary accuracy killer in most quartz movements. The 0100 circuit eliminates them in real time. Since 2019, it holds the title of world's most accurate, self-contained, light-powered watch movement. The A60 caliber, in high-end models like the Citizen AQ4103, released in late 2025, achieves plus or minus 5 seconds per year, still beyond what any mechanical movement at any price can match without external correction. But the 0100 alone isn't why Citizen belongs at number 3. It belongs here because of what EcoDrive represents as an engineering philosophy. An EcoDrive movement has no mainspring to fatigue or fracture, no lubricant to degrade, no winding rotor under daily stress, no crown seals degrading from repeated winding. The photovoltaic cell converts any light, whether sunlight, fluorescent office lighting, or a table lamp, into stored charge. The capacitor holds months of reserve in complete darkness. Citizen rates full charging function for roughly 25 years of normal use before cell efficiency meaningfully declines. Apply failure mode analysis to an EcoDrive and compare the list to any mechanical movement. Mainspring fracture, not applicable. Lubricant viscosity change from temperature swings, not applicable. Automatic winding mechanism wear, not applicable. Crown seal compression failure from regular winding, not applicable. The standard mechanical failure modes don't exist here because the components carrying those failure modes were designed out of the system before production started. And the service economics reinforce the engineering argument. An EcoDrive doesn't need a lubricant service on the mechanical watch schedule. Battery replacement, where applicable, is a $10 job at any jeweler. The photovoltaic cell's degradation over 25 years is gradual and predictable, not sudden. The total cost of ownership over a decade of daily wear for an EcoDrive is a fraction of what a mechanical watch at the same purchase price costs to maintain. There's a paramedic in Osaka who has worn the same Citizen EcoDrive daily for over a decade through clinical work, where accurate timekeeping isn't optional, never serviced, never a battery replaced. Submerged, dropped on tile, left on dashboards through multiple summers, auto-corrected every morning against atomic time, about $300. He doesn't think about his watch at all. That is the engineering argument made real. And the thing is, there are thousands of people like him. Not collectors or enthusiasts, just people who need their watch to work and can't afford for it not to. Citizen built for them first. The fact that the caliber 0100 also happens to be the most accurate self-contained movement ever made is almost a side effect of the same design discipline. Citizen solved reliability by removing what fails. The next brand solved it by making what remains more precisely built than anyone else has managed in a century. Number 2, Rolex. Here is what Rolex actually did when they designed the caliber 3235. They rebuilt more than 90% of the components from the previous 3135, itself already proven across nearly 30 years of production, and filed 14 new patents to do it. The Chronergy escapement runs 15% more efficiently than the traditional Swiss lever design, meaning less power lost per oscillation and more consistent energy delivery across the full 70-hour reserve. The Parachrom hairspring is an alloy Rolex developed internally, insensitive to magnetic fields, 10 times more shock-resistant than a standard steel spring. Paraflex shock absorbers, developed in-house. The 904L oyster steel casing material was originally engineered for chemical plant piping in corrosive industrial environments. Harder, more corrosion-resistant, and more reflective than the 316L steel used by nearly every other watchmaker. After all of that, Rolex tests each movement to their superlative chronometer standard of -2 to +2 seconds per day, then cases it and tests again. COSC allows -4 to +6. Rolex considered that insufficient, so they wrote their own standard and ran the test twice. The practical outcome: 10-year recommended service intervals. Watchmakers routinely report Rolexes brought in past that deadline still running accurately. The figure is conservative by design, because Rolex built in margin for the reality that many owners miss the deadline. A standard Rolex service runs $800 to $1,200 at an authorized center, and the brand maintains service capability for movements going back decades. The Caliber 3135, in production from 19 through the late 2010s, is so thoroughly understood globally that servicing one is routine regardless of geography. A watchmaker in Nairobi, Stockholm, or Sao Paulo with 10 years in the trade almost certainly knows the 3135 as well as anything in their workshop. That depth of expertise, accumulated over 3 decades and across every major city on Earth, doesn't appear on any specification sheet. But it's one of the most important reliability factors in the entire industry. Where Rolex doesn't lead genuine innovation, they use a traditional lever escapement, an older design than Omega's coaxial, which theoretically produces less friction. But Rolex's answer isn't better escapement theory. Its manufacturing tolerance is so precise, applied to components made entirely in-house, that the older design performs comparably to the more advanced one in real-world conditions. If Omega took the path of mechanical innovation, Rolex took the path of mechanical perfection. Both paths produce watches running for decades. Rolex's path is documented over a longer time horizon, with more service data behind it. There's one more factor that rarely appears in movement comparisons: the Oyster case itself. The screw-down crown, the screw-down caseback, and the machined case tube create a hermetic seal that keeps moisture and dust away from the movement more reliably than most competitors' case designs. Movement reliability is partly movement engineering. It's also partly case engineering. A movement that never encounters moisture or particulate contamination doesn't need to defend against them. Rolex built the environment the movement lives in as carefully as they built the movement itself. If reliability is uptime, the probability that the watch on your wrist is working accurately today and in 20 years. Rolex holds the strongest mechanical track record in the history of watchmaking. But mechanical is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Rolex is the most reliable mechanical watch brand ever produced. Number 1 isn't mechanical, and by the engineering numbers, it still wins. Number 1, Casio G-Shock. In 1981, a Casio engineer named Kikuo Ibe dropped a watch his father had given him. It shattered on the floor. He submitted a single-line project proposal the following week: a durable watch that would not break even if dropped. For the next 2 years, he threw prototypes out of a bathroom window at Casio's Tokyo offices. More than 200 prototypes, out of a window, failed, examined, revised, thrown again. The breakthrough came from watching children bounce a rubber ball in a park near the office. If the internal module floated inside the outer case with limited contact points, the way a ball's core is isolated from impact by its outer skin, shocks couldn't transfer directly into the mechanism. Project Team Tough, 3 engineers total, built the DW5000C on that principle. Triple 10, surviving a 10-meter drop, 10 atmospheres of water pressure, 10-year battery life. Launched in April 1983, 2 colors, resin case. Nobody at Casio was confident anyone would buy it. Now look inside a current G-Shock. A quartz oscillator at 32,768 Hz. Inherently stable frequency standard. No lubricant anywhere in the timekeeping circuit. No mainspring. No winding rotor. No gaskets under repeated compression from winding. The module in a solar multi-band 6 model like the GW B5600 recharges from any light source and synchronizes daily to atomic radio signals across 6 global time zones. The watch isn't just running, it's correcting itself automatically against cesium atomic standards that lose 1 second every 300 million years. Accuracy drift between syncs, plus or minus 15 seconds per month at worst. On a day with a successful sync, 0. Here is the comparison that stops arguments. A Rolex Submariner from April 1983, the same month the first G-Shock launched, needs to have been serviced at minimum twice to still be running accurately today. The lubricants in a mechanical movement have a service life of 7 to 10 years. The mainspring accumulates fatigue, crown seals degrade. None of this is a design flaw in Rolex. It's the physics of mechanical systems. A well-serviced 1983 sub is probably running beautifully. But a G-Shock DW5000C from that same April, with a fresh battery, is almost certainly also still running, without a single service in its life, because there is nothing in the quartz module that degrades on the same schedule as mechanical lubricants. The crystal oscillates, the circuit counts, the display updates. That is the entire mechanism. Before the comment arrives, yes, when a G-Shock module eventually reaches end of life, it's typically a module swap rather than a traditional service. But Casio still supplies modules for watches discontinued 30 years ago, because production volumes make parts economics completely different from a brand making 800,000 watches per year. And the module replacement costs a fraction of what a Rolex service runs. The person who understands this best isn't a collector. He's the paramedic in Osaka who has worn the same solar multiband G-Shock for 11 years through clinical work. Never serviced, never a battery replaced. Submerged and dropped and left on dashboards in August heat. Never wrong in a way that mattered. Auto-corrected every night at 2 a.m. while he sleeps. $300. He doesn't think about his watch. That's exactly the point. Reliability isn't about which movement has the most beautiful rotor. It's not about which certification looks best on a caseback. It's about uptime, the actual measured probability that the watch on your wrist is doing the one thing watches exist to do, today and tomorrow, and 15 years from now. By that measure, there is no more reliable brand on this list than Casio. That answer bothers some people. Good. The physics doesn't care either way. The brands that rank highest here all treated reliability as a design objective from the beginning, not a quality control pass at the end of the production line. Rolex over-engineers every component they make in-house and then tests it twice. Citizen removes components from the failure equation entirely. Casio isolates the timekeeping mechanism from the forces that kill mechanical watches. Grand Seiko individually calibrates each oscillator before anything leaves the factory floor. These are decisions made at the drawing board, not in the press release, not in the boutique. What connects the brands toward the bottom of this list is different. The marketing arrived before the engineering was ready to support it. Caliber names implying manufacture without manufacture substance behind them. Service ecosystems designed more for revenue than for the person who spent the money. Certification seals that are real, but incomplete descriptions of what you're actually buying. The gap between a brand that treats reliability as a first principle and one that treats it as a marketing claim is not always visible in the boutique. It shows up 3 years later when something goes wrong and you start making phone calls. Some calls come back answered with a service turnaround time of 2 weeks and a $200 bill. Other calls come back with a wait of 6 months and a number that makes you wish you'd asked different questions before buying. You don't need to be an engineer to ask those questions. You just need to know what they are before you buy, not after you're already sitting in a service queue. The pinned comment has exactly that. What to look for in a movement specification, what service actually costs across price tiers, and what COSC means, and, more important, what it quietly doesn't. Go get it! Which brand surprised you most on this list? Let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe.